Hey, Nohemi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
It's so good to see you. Um, so this is my friend Nohemi, and she's going to be sharing some of her story. She has a little bit of a different take than some of the other folks that you've heard from during this summit. But I will let her quickly introduce herself and maybe a little bit of the lens that you're looking at these questions through, Nohemi, and then I'll take it away with the first question.
Great, awesome, thank you. Hi guys, my name is Nohemi. I am a former DACA recipient and advocate for migrant rights. I have been involved in the nonprofit world for about a decade now, and I am really excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. Noemi's the best, so I really scored on who I got to interview. So the first question or just kind of thing we'd love to hear you interact with is how has the border or the policies that are connected to the border, how have they impacted you and your family?
Okay, like I said earlier, I grew up undocumented. I didn't actually learn what that meant until I was in my late teens. It was like junior year in high school. Um, I just didn't really realize that I wasn't allowed to cross the border yet. And truthfully, it wasn't that much of a big deal to me at the time. I didn't think that that was a huge limitation. I thought that the other aspects of being undocumented was a little bit more of a pressing matter to me. But as I went into like young adulthood, I realized that I was actually really desperate to be able to be in contact with my family and my culture and my roots. And it was really hard to feel San Diego as a home when I knew that I wasn't from here, legally at least. San Diego will always be home to me in the sense that I grew up here and I know every single street and small business in San Diego. But that there's still that itching of I want to be able to go back to my roots, and I'm still unable to travel still. So that has been kind of a strain on a couple of my relationships. I'm now married, and we would have loved to go to Mexico for our honeymoon and go explore like where I'm from and where all the foods that we enjoy and love are from, and have my husband meet the rest of my family. But unfortunately, right now, that's not something that we are able to do. So I guess more recently, the way that it has divided my life has been through family relationships and culturally.
Is it something that you are aware of on a daily basis, like your proximity to the border and what it represents to you?
Absolutely. It's really strange because I'm in the hospitality business, so I have to interact with a lot of my culture, but as an outsider. So a lot of the times I'm learning about things that I feel like I should already know about from, for lack of a better term, from white people that went to my country to go visit and went to go study the things that are roots to me and that's my culture and things that I feel like I should know by now. And I have to learn them through a third party. So I am very aware of it on a daily basis. It is something that I think that it's something that I think about on a daily basis overall. With my parents, like getting older, I wish that I was able to like take them to Mexico and have them like visit their parents and talk to my grandparents and be able to visit family members. And that hasn't happened in years. I mean, the border is getting stricter and stricter every day, especially with COVID happening this year. So I haven't been able to have access to see my family in years. And I think that that is like the biggest impact of the border in my daily life, not being able to connect and knowing that there's a very physical barrier between me and like my family, my culture, and the place that I came from.
Right.
Also, a lot of like small mannerisms that I now have because I grew up in a Hispanic household, I have like no explanation for. So now that I'm experiencing motherhood and I'm like trying to teach my kid about my stuff so that they are able to connect with me and so that we are able to have that, I guess, bond. I'm struggling a little bit to be able to remember like why I do the things that I do,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to have that physical connection or just show him. I feel like I keep like showing him like secondhand or like I guess like fakes of like what is actually happening in Mexico.
Yeah.
Or I will try to like introduce him to new foods or new styles of music, and he'll ask me specific questions and I'll be like, I don't actually know the answer to that. Let me Google that really quick, or let me call my mom. Whereas I wish that it was just easy enough for me to say, you know what, let's go find out together. Let's go next weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would feel that way had I had access to the border my whole life. I think that like you appreciate and you want all the things that you can't have sometimes, right? So I think that to an extent, like the border is like this huge thing for me because it has a daily impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
But if it were the other way around, I don't know that I would think about it so often.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit more, just for those who may not know, like what DACA is, why you were a former recipient of it, or why you qualified for DACA, and then also just what have been some of the challenges with being undocumented and being a DACA recipient?
So the first challenge that I faced as being undocumented was in high school. That's when I found out that I was undocumented, which at the time I didn't really have access to FAFSA or the scholarships that I was being offered because I didn't have a social security number. And I didn't realize how important the social security number was until I realized that I couldn't apply to all the schools that wanted me to apply. So that was like, I think my first border, my first like physical wall of like, cool, like where do I go from here? The few classes that were available in college for me were basically all the classes that the other students didn't want. So the professors would push it as like, hey, this is this really great class and that's why it's so expensive. And it's like, nobody wants to be here, but like, this is what's accessible to me right now. On top of that, college being really expensive and not being able to like have access to financial aid for it, I also couldn't apply for a job because or else I would be working under the table, and I didn't want that to be like a reason why I would get denied for a working visa or something like that eventually. So I did photography as like a freelance photographer for a couple of years. I was trying to get myself through college, but obviously like it's not a consistent amount of money coming in. So that was really hard for me to be able to like grow as an adult. I like struggled with being able to apply for an apartment or a driver's license or any basic like milestones from teenager to adulthood. So around like the end of that and into my early 20s, I got accepted into DACA, and there were still a couple of limitations for it and there were a lot of qualifications for it, but I managed to get through on like the first batch of kids that applied. And it does cost $500 to apply. So that in itself, it's already not super accessible to everyone. And on top of that, like the qualifications are that you have to be a certain age, you have to be in the country for a certain amount of time. You have to have proof that you've been in this country the entire time that you're saying that you've been here. And for me, it was easy because I've been to school here my entire life. So I had those school records. But for people that were outside of that age range of and not having access to school the way that I did, I know that that was like a whole other obstacle to be able to prove that they existed in the country.
Yeah.
And I think that like overall the whole act of having to prove your existence was a little bit dehumanizing. It definitely separates you from like, who am I and what am I doing and where am I going? Because you have to prove that you just exist.
Right.
So that in itself was already kind of a journey for me specifically as I was applying and trying to get the DACA permit. And then once I did, I had it for a couple of years, and eventually a visa that my mom had applied for like 12 years ago finally pulled through. And that's not me being dramatic. It really took over a decade for them to process our paperwork and for us to be able to finish paying off the actual paperwork and the lawyers. And so that visa came in a couple of months after my DACA expired. It was the year that the Trump administration decided to end the program, so I couldn't reapply. And once I did reapply, they basically took my $500 and never responded. I actually can still check onto the website to check what's happening with my DACA process, and it still says that it's getting processed in like Nebraska or something. It's changed states a couple of times, which I think it's kind of odd, but other than that, it just says that I'm still in process. So had my visa not come in, I don't really know that I would be able to be legally in the States right now, which is super scary to think about. But I think the universe had a specific timeline for me.
Yeah.
That's literally the only reason that I'm not a DACA recipient right now. It was over a very well-timed visa that came in a decade later.